On its own, Dark Souls 3 is good, but I feel it's being elevated by the games that came before it, building a narrative that led up to Dark Souls 3 finally ending the trilogy. The game itself has some of the best boss design of the entire series, but to fully understand the setup for Dark Souls 3, we must first explain the lore from the previous games. Before the world of Dark Souls, there was nothing. There was only stone and dragons, for some reason. Suddenly, there was a fire, and the very first beings to claim this fire is what we call lords. These lords ushered in an age of fire, the world we currently find ourselves in. But unfortunately, the fire slowly fades, and the lords go without thrones. Because the lords don't want to lose their power, they sacrifice themselves to continue the Age of Fire, relinking the flame, in a sense. This happened many times over until we reach Dark Souls 3. Again, with the fire fading, the Lord Lothric was tasked to relink the fire, but Lothric didn't want to link it, so the Bells of Awakening toll as a last result, causing previous Lords of Cinder to wake from their slumber, but they didn't want to link the flame either, as, you know, they wouldn't want to get burned alive a second time. Then you come in, someone who tried but failed to link the fire, unkindled ash as they call it. Now we can show the opening cutscene.
Indeed. It is called Lothric, where the transitory lands of the Lords of Cinder converge. In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words. The fire fades, and the lords go without thrones. When the link of fire is threatened, the bell tolls, unearthing the old lords of Cinder from their graves. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, Farron's Undead Legion, the Abyss Watchers. And the reclusive lord of the Profaned capital. Yon the Giant. Only in truth, the lords will abandon their thrones. And the unkindled will rise. Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder. And so it is that ash seeketh embers.
After 10 hours of character creation, we wake up out of a tombstone in the Cemetery of Ash. The level itself serving as an introduction to the game. If need be, there are messages written across the beginning area on the ground that provide instructions on the game's controls. we continue to go forward and come across our first of many bonfires. Bonfires in the Soul series mostly serve as fast travel points, but they have additional utility like selecting different spells, recovering Estus charges, repairing equipment, etc. With not much else to do, since this is quite literally the tutorial area of the game, we continue heading forward until we see a large humanoid in ironclad armor. Again, with not much else to do, we approach it. And as we approach it, we can see there is a sword embedded in him alongside some weird black ooze leaking out of him. As the prompt says, we remove the coiled sword and then this happens. Eudag's Gundyr is the first of 19 bosses we can find in Dark Souls 3, concluding the tutorial with a boss. On your first playthrough, Gundyr will probably pose a big challenge, but it becomes a pushover on consecutive playthroughs. One big thing that Dark Souls 3 did is that most humanoid bosses are parryable now, those being shown on screen now. Gundyr himself boasts a pretty standard arsenal of attacks, most being sweeps or jabs. It's recommended to dodge or prefer pre-parry can, as blocking all his attacks is nigh impossible due to the stamina constraints. Now, Gundyr will only give the coiled sword to whoever beats him in battle, serving as a judge in a sense. After reaching a certain health threshold, which is about half health, a large black mass erupts out of his neck. More on that later. Causing him to gain a few new attacks, those being a lunge attack, sweep attack and a grab attack. Eventually we do beat him and rest at the bonfire that spawned, which happens every time we beat the boss from now on. Overall, it's pretty B-tier boss. Now that he's defeated, we can finally continue and enter. Firelink Shrine is basically a hub area to return to for leveling your character, upgrading gear, buying or selling goods, and giving NPCs key items. As we continue to meet NPCs, they will often end up in Firelink Shrine. Beating bosses and unlocking new areas may also cause new NPCs to appear. But as of right now, there are but a few NPCs we can talk to. The Firekeeper will be our sole method for leveling our character. The Shrine Handmaid is the one who will be giving extra ashes, selling equipment to, or buying resources from. Andre the Smith, quite obviously, will be for upgrading our gear. We can also see Hawkwood. He's an unkindled deserter from Farron's Undead Legion. Being wanted for deserting the Legion, he doesn't want to search for the Lords of Cinder, as is the duty of the unkindled. Thus, he seeks refuge in Firelink Shrine. We also have Lodlif, the only Lord of Cinder that accepted to quite literally be fuel for the fire again. He'll be more useful to us later as he possesses the special ability of transposition, allowing us to use boss souls to turn into correlating items/weapons. Lastly, we have Leonhard. He will give us cracked red eye orbs to invade other players. But nothing else currently. Most NPCs have a corresponding questline. I will only cover Uria's questline in detail as it's tied to an ending. The rest, not much so. Another thing to note is that on the outside of the shrine there is the infamous tree jump. Performing this jump gives access to the roof of Firelink Shrine, where you can get some pretty important items like an Estus shard, the coveted silver serpent ring, and the Estus ring. Unlike other bonfires, the bonfire in the shrine can be used to burn undead bone shards, giving more HP per use of the Estus flask. And to reinforce the sense of Firelink Shrine being a hub area, we have to use the bonfire to travel to the next area. The High Wall of Lothric is the first real level of the game, having a boss at the end of the level and all that. As you open the door to the first bonfire, you are met with an insane view of the level. Fairly early on in this level we come across a group of undead. As we approach, the same black mass erupts from one of the undead. This is called a Boss of Man. It's the same ooze we saw when we fought Gundyr. This is a manifestation of the Abyss, quite literally the power of the dark. But know that the Abyss itself manifests in a multitude of ways, this being one of them. Continue to progress in the level until we find a certain individual called Emma, who will tell you the following.
The wait has been long, Unkindled One. I am Emma, High Priestess of Lothric Castle. Allow me to speak frankly. You will not find the Lords of Cinder here. They have left, gone, to their churning homes converging at the base of this castle. Head to the bottom of the high wall, forge on through the great gate, and raise this banner to proceed. This farewell gift is for you. It is the insignia of an old covenant. If you fear trespassers, dark spirits drawn by the embers, then etch this upon your heart, and the old Concord will beckon noble blue sentinels to hunt these foul spirits. Unkindled One, head to the high wall's base. Go through the great gate, but beware. The dog keeps a close eye on things. The vile watchdog of the Boreal Valley.
Alternatively, you can just murder her, causing the Dancer of the Boreal Valley to spawn, but more on that later. You can then continue until the Grand Archives, at which point you are met with a locked door and cannot go further. But we didn't do that, so we have to go to the base of the high wall. But before that, we do some more exploring. We find a cell key. Wondering what we can use it on, we wander until we find a cell that contains a prisoner, and we use our cell key on that. We free the prisoner and he tells us to find a person called Loretta in exchange for, well, something. He says she can be found in the Undead Settlement. He tells us his name, which is Grey Rat, and we accept the offer. He will then travel to Firelink Shrine where we can find him. But we have to continue. So we head to, as Emma said, to the base of the high wall, and as we approach the door, this happens. I think Vord's boss team has got to be the most recognizable part of this game. Vord is one of the two knights of a certain Pontiff Sullivan, an Archdragon knight to be precise, each of which is given a ring that transforms them into these frenzied beasts. They're basically Pontiff Sullivan's watchdogs. Vord himself has pretty standard attacks, a sweep, lunge, a charge, etc. When fighting Vord, it's recommended to stay very close to him as you can easily avoid his attacks that way since he has a very big hitbox. Another thing to mention is that basically every boss in Dark Souls 3 has a second phase, so it shouldn't be surprising that when we reach a certain health threshold with Vord, he becomes even more frenzied and ups the ante quite a bit, becoming more aggressive and gaining a few new attacks. One of these attacks is a White Breath attack. He is very vulnerable during this attack, so if you roll through the breath and approach him from the side, you can easily attack him and do major damage, as he can quite literally do nothing about it until he's done. Overall, a nadir boss, carried hard by its OST. Now that we've beaten Vort, the door opens. We raise the banner as Emma said to us, and this cutscene plays. The first thing we do when we enter the Undead Settlement and go down the stairs is make sure these fucking dogs die, because oh my god, they're the worst enemy in the fucking game. Believe it or not, but there are actually quite a few undead in the Undead Settlement. Too much even. So what happens is that everyone in the Undead Settlement is busy trying to keep this overpopulation to a minimum. But more on that at the end of the level. Before we go to the second bonfire, we go back and meet a certain individual.
Please, grant me death. Undo my shackles. Oh, then it's true. A champion of Ash as I live and breathe. To be in your presence is a great honor. I am Anor of Londo, a pilgrim as you can see, only somehow I failed to die as was ordained. Well, perhaps my calling lies elsewhere. Say, champion of Ash, how does the idea of taking me into your service strike you? I was once a sorcerer. Surely I can be of use. Oh, I am honored, truly. I should be dead, yet you have granted me purpose anew. I, Anor of Londo, do solemnly swear myself to you.
We can now find Gael in Firelink Shrine, but we must go to the second bonfire first. As we continue further, we can see these hanging corpses. We even find one outside. We cut the rope to retrieve the item, but as we fall down, we find out it's Loretta's bone. The one who we had to give the ring to for Grey Rat. Now to continue, we can take two paths, one longer and one shorter. We first go with the longer path, but before that we kill the enemies nearby to retrieve an Estus shard near the tree. Near said tree we can find an evangelist. These are undead from the Cathedral of the Deep, sent to the Undead Settlement to take undead with them and take them to the Cathedral. Probably so they can get consumed by Aldrich. More on that later. Again. To dispatch of the enemies here quickly, you can throw firebombs on the crates, making them explode and instantly obliterating a few enemies. Now that that's done, we can continue forth. When we are near the next bonfire, we get invaded by a NPC named Godric. I couldn't kill him unfortunately, because another enemy wanted to do the same to me as well. After that's done, the next thing we find out is that we're getting shot at from who knows where. Well, actually, remember the cutscene when we were being taken to the Undead Settlement? We can actually see who's shooting at us. It's the giant on that tower over there. Since we can't do anything about it right now, we have to dodge the arrows and head forth to eventually get to the boss. Curse-Rotted Greatwood is an optional boss we can find near the end of the Undead Settlement. The Curse-Rotted Greatwood is a result of all the burials, dissections, etc. that happened in the Undead Settlement. It caused all manner of curses to quite literally seep into the ground, which the Curse-Rotted Greatwood fed upon. As we fight the boss, Undead keep spawning in and keep attacking us. The boss itself is kind of a gimmick boss, as it can only be damaged via the pustules on it. So that's our first priority. After we break the first pustule, the Greatwood slams into the ground, causing it to break, stopping any extra undead from spawning. Greatwood boasts very powerful attacks consisting mostly of sweeps. Fortunately, they're easy to dodge. We keep slowly but surely destroying more pustules until we survive with a literal sliver of health. Safe to say, Curse-Rotted Greatwood enters B tier. Now that the boss is dead, we can explore the area a bit. There's not much to explore in the Pit of Hollows, only an altar to offer vertebrae shackles to, an item used to increase standing with the Mountain Maker's Covenant. With nothing else to do, we head back to Firelink Shrine to meet Yoel and give the bone to Grey Rat.
Fret not, my feet are here firmly planted, for I am a lord, and this is my throne. Oh, belike it is a transposing kiln in thy possession. Seen better days, but methinks it shall suffice. Now, bring to me a twisted soul. Transposition is the art of extracting and coalescing the essence of a soul. In transposing a twisted soul, its true power transferreth to thee. Thy purpose is to seek lords and slay them. What's to fear in a little transposition now? Now, do not be away over long.
Oh, hello, you're back. And in one piece. Well, now it's time I do my part. Whatever trinket you need, speak up. Just don't ask me where I got them. Heavens, she was already dead. Thank you. I'm not surprised, though. Almost a relief, really. You can keep the ring as, well, a little trinket of thanks, I suppose. Oh, our champion of Ash, welcome home. This pilgrim, with a debt in death, hardly deserves to behold this divine flame. And I never would have, had you not taken me into your service. I thank you dearly for this, and assure you of my leal service. Then shall we begin? Bearer of the dark sign, let your true strength shine. Be safe, champion of Ash.
After we're done with the Undead Settlement, we head to the next area. Just like the previous level, there are two ways to continue. One way will lead to the Crystal Sage, which will lead to the Deacons of the Deep, and the other way will lead you to the Abyss Watchers and High Lord Wolnir. Usually I go take the Crystal Sage route first. Remember that giant shooting arrows at us back in the Undead Settlement? This is that tower actually. Now the lift goes up the first time you enter, but if you look carefully you can see there's another platform. So to reach the giant you have to let the lift descend without actually getting onto the platform. Then get onto the lift again. Then you can meet the giant and talk to him so that he won't shoot you when you enter that area again. Now just before the bonfire to get to the next area there is this mini boss thing waiting for us that of course like every other enemy will try to kill us. They are actually quite dangerous, so if you want you can just open the door instead because opening the door gives you invincibility frames. And then we finally reached the Road of Sacrifices. The actual Road of Sacrifices section is pretty short, so we won't be spending too much time there. We actually want to go to the Crucifixion Woods instead, so after a few minutes of exploration we can see the next bonfire. When we approach it, we see two NPCs, which are Henri and Horace.
Oh, hello. How do you do? I am Henri of Astora, unkindled like you. This is Horace, a friend and travelling companion. Are you too in search of the Lords of Cinder? We are well along the Road of Sacrifices. Below us is the Crucifixion Woods. Beyond the flooded woods lies Farron Keep, home of the Undead Legion. Further yet is the Cathedral of the Deep. We seek the Cathedral, home of the grim Aldrich. We may go our separate ways now, but we are both seekers of lords. The next time we cross paths, one may find the other in a time of need. May the flames guide your way.
Now Henri will be the opposite gender of the player, always, because it's tied to the quest line, just so you know. So the first thing we do is talk to them, and after that encounter we head straight for the Crucifixion Woods. This is where you can either decide to go to the Crystal Sage first or the Abyss Watchers. And you already know, we are going to fight the Crystal Sage first. In my opinion, whenever I fight the Crystal Sage, it can either go one of two ways. One of them being getting instantly killed by several attacks, and the other one being a absolutely ridiculously easy win because the Sage kept using the same bad attacks. Speaking of which, the Crystal Sage's attacks are actually very powerful. They do a lot of damage, easily doing about half of your HP bar worth of damage actually in one attack. But the attacks travel really slowly, so it's really easy to dodge them. The attacks themselves consist of a Homing Crystal Soul Mass, a Soul Spear, Soul Rain, a Soul Crystal Mass, and a crystal version of the White Dragon Breath sorcery, and a few sweeps with its Rapier. The Crystal Sage we fight is one of the two who allied with the Undead Legion to train the Sorcerers of Farron. When we reach the 50% health threshold, the Crystal Sage summons a bunch of clones. Fortunately they have 1 HP, unfortunately they do full damage. It's actually quite easy to spot the real Sage as it's the only one with the purple hue to its magic, but it is recommended to go for the clones first, because they will absolutely spam their attacks at you. And if you're having trouble with the boss, you can easily use throwing knives to get rid of the decoys at a very decent range. And after quite a few attempts actually, we finally beat the Sage. Now, this boss was kind of mediocre, but from now on they will get better. Overall, the Crystal Sage is a B-tier boss. After the Crystal Sage boss fight, we continue to the next area. Now, after the first bonfire, right before the next area, is this one section. What you don't want to do in this section is follow the middle path. You want to go to the left instead and follow from there. This way you can avoid the undead dogs, which are, as I said before, the worst enemy in the game. And after that section we can enter the Cathedral of the Deep. But before we do that we have to kill these undeads for a Estus shard. Right after that we enter the Cathedral. As we approach the bonfire, we can hear a hooded figure. He will be important later, but for now we have to shut him up before he spoils anything. We can't continue from here as both doors are locked, as always. So we head outside again and go to the graveyard. Inside this graveyard there are constantly respawning enemies, though said enemies are very weak. They can and will probably kill you, but they're probably not much of a threat as you think they are. There are also these enemies that inflict you with bleed when they hit you. That's because they infect you with some sort of flesh-eating worms, I don't know. To make sure you don't die from this blood loss or use all your Estus charges in the process, you can use your torch and equip it to remove the worms. And after a small section outside the cathedral, we can enter it. Now, just about right after that, we encounter a giant. What you want to do, or what you can do, is just use sorceries to kill it, or alternatively just bait out attacks and punish them. From there on, when you kill the giant, you can just jump down and head straight for the boss, which actually skips a big part of the level in the process. Furthermore, when you jump down, if you have something like the Spook spell, which prevents falling damage, you don't have to use any Estus flasks when you jump down. But I think it's time that we fight the next boss. I actually kind of like the Deacons of the Deep. They're not the most original nor hard boss in the game, but the way you usually approach them makes it really fun for me. Having a big sword and swinging through enemies is very satisfying, you know? The original purpose of the Deacons was actually to contain the Deep, but eventually they succumbed to the Deep. One of these Deacons is Aldrich, which was supposed to be here instead, but as we enter the arena, Aldrich's coffin is open and Aldrich, of course, isn't there. Most Deacons have the same lunge or stab attack, some can even throw fireballs at you. But there's always one Deacon that's glowing red, and that's the Deacon you have to kill to damage the boss. After we completely eviscerate a certain amount of these Deacons, a small group of new ones will appear, including the Archdeacon named Royce. This is our new target from now on, and as usual with a second phase comes some new attacks. Some Deacons can now cast the Deep Soul sorcery as well, but most importantly is a curse build-up attack. Some of the Deacons can start to build a giant projectile dealing huge damage or build curse, including the Archdeacon. So it's best to interrupt this as soon as you can before the curse meter fills up and instantly kills you. Most guides will tell you to just focus the glowing Deacon, but I say to first cut through the Deacons blocking you. Instead of damaging them, kill them, as it makes a huge difference if you don't have enough damage per second to beat the boss quickly. If you really want to have an easy time, you can equip Pontiff's left eye to gain a huge amount of HP while you're attacking the Deacons, as the amount of HP you get actually depends on the amount of enemies you hit. Furthermore, you can even use the Alluring Skull or the Ring of the Evil Eye to make this boss even easier. So overall I think this boss is pretty fun, but not amazing from a mechanics or design perspective. But the fun factor does bring it up a notch to low A tier, in my opinion.
Oh, and we meet again. We spoke before on the road of sacrifices. Anri of Astora. I'm well pleased to see you safe. We reached the Cathedral of the Deep, but Aldrich's coffin was empty. The man-eater must have left for his true home. The little doll in the empty coffin told me. Aldrich is said to hail from Irithyll in the Boreal Valley, an ancient fabled city. A pilgrim told me that the city lies beyond Farron Keep, and so becomes our destination.
It seems they are headed for Irithyll of the Boreal Valley, the same place we are headed to. But to go to Irithyll, we have to head back to the Crucifixion Woods. As we cross the river, we can see two NPCs and of course they attack us. Don't worry, you can just head down the ladder and activate the bonfire, but we decided to attack them anyways. After our second attempt, we can finally enter Farron Keep. First thing we see when we enter Farron Keep is a message on the ground that tells us to extinguish 3 flames, which you can easily do by following the fires around the level. After we find the first flame, we of course extinguish it and then this cutscene plays. Now we just have to do that twice more. Unfortunately, as we approach the last fire, we die. The astute of you may have noticed the icon on the top left of my health bar has changed. Maybe Joel has something to tell us about that. But before we can do that, we go to the last flame and extinguish it. Now we can finally fight the Abyss Watchers, though we go to Joel first.
Oh, our champion of Ash. Welcome back. I would do anything for my master. Just say the word. Then shall we? Then shall we begin?
As we talk to Joel, it doesn't seem like he will explain what happened to us. But we continue to draw out our true strength because we didn't do that last time. And after doing it a few times, he has this to say.
You have attained ample strength. All will soon be clear, my good lord. Be safe, our lord.
Apparently we are a lord of something now. More on this when we finish Anri's questline though. But for now, we leave Firelink Shrine to head back to defeating the Abyss Watchers. And as we approach, we can already hear the commotion inside. before we do anything else, we have to put the Abyss Watchers in S tier. Anyways, Farron's Abyss Watchers were Farron's Abyss Watchers were originally tasked with keeping the Abyss at bay, no surprise there. But like the Deacons of the Deep, they also succumbed to the Abyss, spreading to their legion, causing them to essentially fight an endless battle with themselves. When we first start the fight, there is only one Abyss Watcher, but as time continues, a second one will attack us, turning it into a multi-boss fight. But luckily the second Watcher has less HP, making it easier to kill. Now, most attacks are always a mix-up of both dagger attacks and greatsword attacks. The Watchers can use their dagger a few times to then go into a stab or a lunge attack with the greatsword, etc. I suggest to get parry windows down for this boss, as it will make the boss 10 times easier. What's really cool is that after some time a third Abyss Watcher will spawn in to come attack the other two who were attacking us. Unless we attack it first, then it will prioritize us. This can turn the battle very chaotic, yet fun, making it some of the most original boss fight in the Soul series. But like every boss we fought so far, when we kill the original Watcher that spawned in, this cutscene plays. Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, no more Watchers will spawn in during the second phase. Rather, we have one Abyss Watcher who's trying to kill us, making it a one-on-one fight, of course. This Abyss Watcher has been empowered by his dead kin, so it seems I think, causing it to gain some new attacks. Well, no new attacks really, rather his attacks all gain some sort of area of effect in the second phase. Something that Elden Ring would shamelessly steal 8 years later in the Shadow of the Earth 3 DLC. Well anyway, after we've defeated the last Watcher, a gap in the wall opens up to reveal the next area, but before we enter it, there's one more thing I have to mention that I originally missed. There's a crucial NPC we have to find in Farron to continue Henri's questline.
Well, this is unexpected. I don't often have visitors. What do you want? This is my study that you've happened upon. If you haven't any business, I've reading to get back to. How intriguing. Very well. Indeed, I am a sorcerer, with plenty to share. However, what champion demands service without recompense? Clearly, you're not that sort of man. So you will make me a promise that in exchange for my teaching, you will bring me knowledge in the form of scrolls detailing sorcery's secrets. Well, can you assure me of this? Very well. You're no fool. I take it you understand the weight of a promise. I am Orbeck, of Vinheim, Unkindled One. I shall teach you sorceries. We will learn together. It shall be like our very own school.
Now that that's done, we can finally enter Catacombs of Carthus. I think Catacombs of Carthus has to be the second worst level in the game. Not because it's badly designed, but because it's extremely difficult to navigate. For me at least, because my navigation skills are subpar at best. Fortunately, we can speedrun this area in less than 2 minutes. First thing we do is take a right turn and go down until we reach the staircase. We enter the hallway and continue to follow the path. Then when we're at the stop due to the hole in the ground, we go down and take the farthest, most right door. We go forth and take a right turn, then go left and cross the bridge. Make sure to destroy the bridge because skeletons were pursuing you. Then you can just continue, open the door and boom, you're at the boss. Now that we're at the boss, we just have to touch this very inconspicuous goblet and then this happens. Now, we have no idea where we are, but hey, there's an item. We grab it and then this happens. High Lord Wolnir can be described as a DPS check. To beat Wolnir, you have to hit the rings on his arms until they break. Breaking them causes Wolnir to get pushed back a significant distance. After the first ring breaks, skeletons will spawn in the arena as well. It's recommended that whenever Wolnir summons his sword, you try to kite the skeletons into one of Wolnir's attacks so they instantly die. Overall, there's not much to it, but it's a pretty fun boss fight, I guess. Like the Deacons of the Deep and the Abyss Watchers, Wolnir was subjected to the Abyss and eventually succumbed to it, going from the ruler of Carthus to literally a giant skeleton stuck in a goblet. Until we eventually break his rings and let Wolnir be consumed by the Abyss. Also, you may or may not know, but you can actually use the Pestilent Mist spell to beat this boss without actually fighting him, but don't tell anybody where you've gotten this sacred knowledge from. Anyway, we're not done yet, as we have to continue Anri's questline. We've already beaten Wolnir and unlocked the bonfire, so we can head back to the entrance of the catacombs and find Anri.
Oh, hello. How very fortunate. Have you seen my companion, Horace? To my shame, I was snared by a trap and we've become separated. I've not been able to find him since. Yes, I see. Horace is a valiant knight. He can look after himself, no question. He's probably searching for me right now, with twice the resolve. If you happen upon him, please tell him that I remain in the catacombs and will lay prism stones to guide him, as always. Please send him my word, I beg of you. May the flames guide your way.
It seems that Horus is lost somewhere in the catacombs, but we can't do anything about that yet, so after we've spoken to her, we can travel to Wolnir's bonfire and go back to the bridge, then take a left turn to find her again.
Ah, hello. We meet again. Have you seen Horus anywhere? Oh yes, I see. I've searched high and low with no luck. Perhaps he's left the catacombs. Oh, Horus, where have you run off to? Oh, Horus, have you abandoned me? No. What a horrible thought.
Oh my fuck. And if you paid some attention, you can actually see a certain individual in what seems to be a lake way down the catacombs. Now that's done, we can go on with the story. But you guys remember the bridge we took down? Well, actually, if you go back to the bridge, you can descend it like a ladder. And after a bit of walking and a demon encounter, we can enter Smouldering Lake. Now I wouldn't consider Smouldering Lake to be a secret area, as it's not hidden behind some very convoluted way to get there. Archdragon Peaks. Now, the Smouldering Lake isn't that big of an area, but it doesn't mean it's an easy in, easy out situation, as the first thing that happens to us is that we get shot by a giant ballista. Before we do anything else, we must find Horus, as he should be here somewhere. It's best to hug the right wall until you find a small entrance, or alternatively you can follow the cairns with candles on them. Now, when we do find him, Horus is hostile towards us, using no other option than to kill him. After that's done, our next priority becomes the Fog Gate. Now, when we go to the left and approach the gate, this happens. This thing may seem scary, but you can actually take care of it quite easily if you bait the ballista. You have to go behind it and wait for the ballista to kill it. We can enter the Fog Gate. Before we get into the old Demon King, we must first explain where demons came from, I think. In the Soul series, demons are born from chaos. So now you may wonder, what is chaos? It goes back to the original Lords of Cinder, the witch Isilith, who in a moment of arrogance tried to create her own first flame, quote unquote, using her own Lord Soul as a base. The experiment, however, failed miserably and ended up creating an unstable chaos flame, which consumed her and turned her into the best boss fight in Dark Souls history, the Bed of Chaos, of course! Let's go! And from the Bed of Chaos came demons. Enter the old Demon King, one of the last demons left after who knows how many decades have passed, the arena filled with corpses of his fellow demon kind. Even still, after all seems lost, he tries to kill us. The old Demon King isn't that hard of a boss fight mechanic wise, but by the time you're fighting him he usually hits very hard, as I think you're not instantly supposed to fight him after Carthus. The demon has a small arsenal of attacks, that being a few sweeps and smashes alongside a few breath attacks. Though when we do enough damage the old Demon King will power up, getting a few attacks, those being a meteor shower and a fire ring. Speaking of which, the boss strikes his club twice, the ring starts moving outwards, and if he strikes 3 times, the ring starts moving inwards. One cool thing is that when the boss reaches about 10% health, he will in a desperate attempt release whatever energy he has left in him to try and kill you. But this leaves him very feeble, indefinitely, as he will never get up and resort to low effort swings. The old Demon King is a very perfect B-tier boss, alright mechanics and some decent lore. Now that our side quest is done, we can go back to the bonfire in the Wolnir's arena and enter the next area. Once again, the moment we enter Irithyll, we are met with an amazing view of the area. Something I wish happened more often, really. One important thing to note is that when we're on the bridge, a Sullivan's Beast will spawn. Please get rid of him as soon as it spawns, because if you don't, it will return and it will be way harder to fight. Besides, to fully enter Irithyll, we need a small doll, which you obtained from the Deacons of the Deep boss fight. That's why we went with the Deacons of the Deep route first back in the Road of Sacrifices. Now, in Irithyll, and only in Irithyll, we can see these ghostly apparitions walking the streets. As far as I know, these were the Outrider Knights of Pontiff Sullivan before they were transformed into, Vort. I think it's safe to assume that this place is ruled over by him. But that begs the question, how did he actually come to power? Well, originally Sullivan came from a place called Ariandel. Later he managed to escape, and after some time managed to find himself in Irithyll. Later still, he took power from within, wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff. Upon entering the church of Yorshka and lighting the next bonfire, we notice that Henri is there as well.
Oh, I thought it might be you. Good to see you. I never managed to find Horace. But my duty must be done, even alone, as an unkindled Lord Seeker. For the children I knew, bless their souls. We all have our reasons, don't we? Please, take this. Recompense for my foolish request. And also a token of protection. May the flames guide your way.
After talking to her, we received the Ring of the Evil Eye, a ring that grants HP from each defeated enemy. A very great ring if you want to make the Deacons of the Deep fight an even easier boss fight on consecutive playthroughs. As we go on with the level, we first take a detour to the next bonfire. Now if you haven't fought Sullivan's Beast yet, this is where he will spawn. But notice, you can't properly sprint in this water, which makes the fight more difficult than if you'd fought him on the bridge. Anyways, after lighting the bonfire, we enter what seems to be some sort of sewer. And we can find the greatest item in the game, literal ash covered with fecal matter. And after some commotion, we enter the Fog Gate. Now, I think before we talk about Pontiff Sullivan, we have to talk about the coveted delayed attacks. I would define a delayed attack to be an attack that purposefully stops for a moment at the apex to make you roll, only to then attack after you rolled, catching it, if you will. I mean, if you've ever played Elden Ring, you know what I mean. Usually these delayed attacks are reserved for powerful grab attacks or for mix-up attacks, but with Sullivan, most of his attacks are delayed to some degree. It doesn't make him a bad boss per se, but I do think it serves as an omen for what's to come in the later games. Elden Ring, Midra. Imagine going full circle and making the delayed attacks easier, to the point they become easier than normal attacks. Alas, if our RNG is bad enough, we enter the coveted delayed attack heaven, a place where every enemy delays their attack to the point it becomes asinine to give a damn rat a delayed attack. But in times of need, we call upon the ancient power of parrying every attack to make Pontiff the easiest boss fight in the game. Because parrying Sullivan got to be the easiest way to win the boss fight, turning it from an absolute unit of a boss to a cakewalk. Of course, I kept parrying him because I already died twice to him and I wanted to be done already. So, after quite a few riposts, dead. And with that out of the way, I think it's time to revisit Firelink Shrine once again. When we go meet Joel, we notice that, unfortunately, he's dead. And a mysterious woman is there too, looking at him. Out of curiosity, we go talk to her.
Oh, prithee, Art thou good Yoel's master? I am Uriah of Londo, a close friend of his. Thanks to thee, Yoel's soul is redeemed. Allow me to express my gratitude in his stead.
But there's more, of course.
Another matter. Thou'rt a lord, art thou not? Bearer of the dark sigil, and our Lord of Hollows. For the time thou remainst our Lord, we of Londo shall serve thee. And I, of course, am also thine. Oh, good Hollow, I'm afraid I must say, Orbeck of Vinheim is a cause of much consternation. He proclaimeth himself Lord of Hollows. If left alone, he may one day imperil thy rule. Fall to this matter yearly, else we are unravelled. Decisiveness is the mark of a true monarch. Till we meet again, may the dark sigil guide thee.
And, of course, again, do the calls, and we kill Orbeck. Then return to Uriah.
It seems too late. And there's only one thing to do. With regret, I will end this here and now. But why? Is that all I'm worth?
Speak thy desire, honourable Lord of Hollows. I see Orbeck's claim is proven false. As it should be our right and deserving Lord of Hollows. It is a Londo treasure befitting of a true Lord. Lord of Hollows, may the dark sigil guide thy way.
And as we wrap up the conversation, she has this final thing to say.
Our lord and liege, knowest thou of a maid named Anri? She is hollow, and will join thee in wedlock. A fellow of mine guides her at this moment. When the time is ripe, thou mayst make thy salutations. For what lord taketh no spouse? Greetings, our lord and liege. Good tidings. Thy spouse is ready. The time is ripe to greet her. The girl awaits thee in the hidden dark moon chamber of Anor Londo. So thou mayst a true monarch become.
Just about 1 minute after defeating Sullivan, we come across one of the most unfair areas in the game. At first glance, you might think it's only a few giants, but actually, no, it's not just the giants. There are deacons on the balcony throwing fireballs at you as well, and of course there are 2 more NPCs that want to kill you. The ultimate gang fight. I recommend picking up the Ember and then instantly running away, because clearing the area isn't worth it. And the same thing applies to the area literally right after. Now, after that, we have to take a little detour. Now, usually there are 2 openings here. One being the opening to the lift, and the other one is an illusionary wall you have to reveal. But because we reached a certain point with Henri's questline, it's already revealed. We go down there, and as we descend, we can already see a pilgrim we have to talk to.
gracious lord. Your spouse awaits you. You are very near. Please, take the sword of avowal. May you be the truest lord of Londo yet.
Now, I have zero idea what happens next is supposed to mean, but we did what we were asked, so eventually this happens. And as we leave the area, we can see that the pilgrim has died, and we make sure to pick up the chameleon spell. And now we can take the lift to the next area, which may or may not seem familiar because it is quite literally Anor Londo from the first game. Talk about reused assets, I guess. The level itself is actually pretty small, basically serving as a gateway to the boss, which you may or may not know is Aldrich, though it should be somewhat obvious once we reach the Fog Gate. More on that later, I guess. Now, we can also find the giant skull here. I haven't talked about ghouls this video yet, because I barely used them this playthrough. Basically, they can be found around the game and they are used for weapon infusions, changing a weapon's properties, damage types, and scaling. But anyways, as we continue, we can already see the Fog Gate. But of course, we open the shortcut first in case we die. But when we do so, this thing comes to kill us. Now, I wasn't bothered taking care of him, as the ring it drops, Aldrich's Ruby, is actually very bad. It recovers HP on critical attacks, though the HP recovered will always be a flat 85 HP, which is really terrible considering most characters at the end game will have around 1000 HP. But enough said, now it's time to fight Aldrich. Aldrich has got to be the second last B-tier boss, just after Ancient Wyvern. Well, Aldrich is actually a very easy boss. As a result, not much has to be said. Most of Aldrich's attacks include magic, which are once again very easy to dodge, quite literally just run away. One thing to note is that whenever you approach Aldrich, he will sink into the ground and reappear elsewhere. That place being the farthest corner from where you were. So if you were in the top left corner, Aldrich will appear in the top right corner. Another thing I have to mention is the arrow attack. When he charges this attack, run away from him as far as possible. And once the arrows are near you, you start spamming roll to avoid most of the damage. Alternatively, you can just go to the side of the arena where the arrows shouldn't be able to hit you. And one last thing I have to mention is that if you're not attacking the human part of Aldrich, which is the front part of him, you will do less damage, about 1/3 actually. And as for his lore, it should be pretty self-explanatory, the name alone should speak for itself really. So yeah, after a few minutes we totally wiped the floor with him. Remember when I said that Carthus was the second worst level in the game? This is the worst one. If we are going to talk about Irithyll dungeon, I think we have to talk about the jailers first. These enemies have to be the goddamn worst things in the entire game, dealing nigh unavoidable damage. By just looking at them, they will temporarily drain your max HP, which won't come back once you recover. Furthermore, they make you fat roll, so that's equal to the 70% equip load roll. Also, having a bunch of them near the end of the dungeon for the next bonfire is literally cruel, actually. And another thing to mention is that this level actually has jump scares. Yes, jump scares. Sometimes when you pick up an item in the dungeon of an undead enemy, you can hear them scream very loud. Now, like mimics, if you're astute enough, you can actually see them move a tiny bit. But of course, you won't notice this on your first playthrough, so this will absolutely jump scare you. Irithyll dungeon is also the level where you can reach the secret area Archdragon Peak, but we can't go there yet because we need another item. Well, a gesture actually, which we will find later, like 2 levels later, I think. But for now, we enter the Profaned capital. Like Anor Londo, the Profaned capital is actually a small level, serving as a gateway to fight the next boss, again, which this time is Yorm the Giant. When we cross the bridge to the next bonfire, a gargoyle will spawn, and for the 3rd time, run away. And when we're near the next bonfire, we can see that fucking leather guy from Dark Souls 2, for some reason. But hey, he has an undead bone shard on him, so that's good, I guess. And from here on out, it's just smooth sailing. We just have to dodge the fireballs being hurled at us. Again. Yeah. And now we just enter the fog gate. Yorm the Giant is actually a puzzle boss. To fight him, you have to go to his throne all the way in the back of the arena to get his weapon, the Storm Ruler. Then you can use the weapon art to damage Yorm. Yorm has some very standard attacks, but it's noticeable that he has a very big range because, you know, he's a fucking giant. If you did Sigurd's questline, he will actually come and help you to fight Yorm, making the boss very easy overall, but he is already an easy boss, you know, it's a puzzle boss. Overall, Yorm has some very standard attacks, though they have a huge ranged potential because, you know, he's a giant, so it's easy for him to reach you. Yeah. And his second stage doesn't do much either, only giving him a bit of AoE attacks and doing a bit more damage. But that doesn't mean he's a bad boss per se, he's actually very enjoyable. Well, go figure why. Spoiler alert, it's actually because he's a giant. Yeah. Anyways, Yorm goes into high A tier, low S tier, but we'll average him out, so A tier. And now it's time to wrap up the fight. And right after we beat Yorm, this cutscene plays.
Unkindled one. The fire fades and awaits its one last lord. Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a lord.
Now, we place the basin on the statue, and then again another cutscene plays. You know how I said that Sullivan has too many delayed attacks? The Dancer of the Boreal Valley only has delayed attacks. But this time it's okay. Because, for one, every attack is a delayed attack, so you can't sight-read every attack. So you can expect it to be a delayed attack. This makes it so it's actually quite easy. Well, given you know the timing for every attack, but that comes after a few attempts. And as the name suggests, the Dancer of the Boreal Valley is the second Outrider Knight of a certain Pontiff Sullivan. And just like how Sullivan uses 2 swords, the Dancer also uses 2 swords. Also a fire sword and a magic dark sword. Though the dark sword doesn't come out until the second phase. One attack that I do have to cover is the grab attack that, if you don't have an Ember active or your HP pool is too low, will literally one-shot you. So it's best to dodge it. Or, you know, get out of the way of the hitbox. Also, whenever the second phase starts, the boss will do a spinning attack. She will spin 7 times during this attack. Usually at the final spin the hitbox will be close enough to damage you. So it's best to avoid it until the last spin, to then dodge it and punish it to get some major damage in. In my opinion, the Dancer is the hardest boss in the base game. But of course, you know, the DLC always has something much worse, like Sister Frida maybe. Well, anyways, the Dancer easily gets into S tier. And after defeating the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, we can place the basin and then this cutscene plays. We can now continue to the last Lord of Cinder, but instead we take a big detour, linking the flame can wait a bit, you know. And after taking the elevator down, we enter the Consumed King's Garden. Now this level, again, is short. But this time it's like actually short, not just short as in you can reach the boss quickly kind short, you know? Now we do have some explaining to do for this area, but that's for when we reach the boss. And I guess it's time we reach the fog gate now, because you can already hear something when we approach it.
You ignorant slaves. Finally taken notice, have you? Of the power of my beloved Ocelot, child of dragons. is all that I have.
So, Osiris, the Consumed King, is actually the king of Lothric. And he's kinda obsessed with becoming a dragon, as you can clearly see by his character model, etc. And as we can see, it clearly didn't work out in the end. Like, he may or may not have gotten insane. Anyways, Osiris also mentioned a certain Ocelot, his supposed child, but he isn't there. So I guess it's time for a little explanation. Right into the transition into the second phase, Osiris absolutely... Jesus Christ. So, right into the transition into the second phase, Osiris absolutely thunder cunts his kid against the ground after losing the ranked. And you may or may not know, but killing a kid, even in a video game, is illegal. So most people believe that he originally had a child and it actually was supposed to be there, but it was removed because, you know, the whole thunder counting thing. And during the second phase he goes absolutely Winton over what? I press Q, I go ultimate. Going from strikes with his staff to lunging at you every 2 seconds. And goddamn, this lunge attack is almost impossible to dodge because it has 0 tells. And another thing this boss has is that the arena is actually way too small for him, because once again, with a single lunge attack, he can go from one side to the arena to another, which is not supposed to happen, as you can clearly see him clipping into the wall. But those issues aside, I do think it's a good boss nonetheless, so it goes right into A tier. After defeating Osiris, we open the door to get the Path of the Dragon gesture, which we will need later. We also open a chest for a Titanite scale. But wait a second, the wall behind the chest is an illusionary wall. And rolling through it, it reveals to us a secret area, the Untended Graves. And once again, I think it's time for a little bit of explaining. Because everything is related to the fire at some point in the Dark Souls series, this means that even time is affected, because fire creates a light and light creates time. And with the fire fading, time also fades in a sense. This causes people from other worlds to appear in your world, which is a lore explanation for the whole summoning thing. Now, what most people think is that the Untended Graves is what happens if the fire isn't linked, the Age of Dark. But why we can find it behind Osiris's arena, we don't know. In my humble opinion, I think it's just like how other people can bleed through your world, places can too. So basically, due to the fire fading, the Untended Graves appeared somewhere in the world, which just happened to be in the Consumed King's Garden. Now, there's not much to the level because, you know, it's a near exact copy-paste of the Cemetery of Ash, which we went through in the beginning of the game. So we just go straight for the boss then. Champion Gundyr is like Eudex Gundyr if he didn't get infected by the Abyss. It's basically Eudex Gundyr in his prime. Now you may think that this is an easy boss because we already fought Eudex Gundyr, right? Well, you would be wrong, because of his second phase. In his second phase, Champion Gundyr becomes way more aggressive and gains, of course, a few new attacks as is with every second phase. But it's the added aggressiveness that really turns this into a very difficult boss fight. Though, like normal Gundyr, Champion Gundyr's weakness is the coveted parry mechanic. But I didn't use parry for some reason. I honestly don't know why. But alas, there is one attack I have to talk about, which is the elbow attack. This attack will do so much damage and is absolutely impossible to dodge. Though it's the only issue I have, which isn't too big of a deal since you can actually predict the elbow attack to some degree, but it's still an issue and remains an issue nonetheless. Champion Gundyr is a solid boss, so it goes into A tier quite easily. And when we're done with Champion Gundyr, we can now continue to the Untended Graves version of the Firelink Shrine, which, believe it or not, is empty. But we're here for a very specific item. And on the way there, we pick up the Coral Sword Fragment. We also meet the Shrine Handmaid, who is still there for some reason. And we pick up the Blacksmith's Hammer. The item we need is actually behind an illusionary wall, and behind that wall we can find the Eyes of a Firekeeper, which we give to the Firekeeper back at the original Firelink Shrine once we're done with this area.
Welcome home, Ashen One. Speak thine heart's desire. Ashen One, are these eyes? How gracious of thee, Ashen One. The very things we Firekeepers have been missing. Ashen One, my thanks for the eyes thou'st given. But Firekeepers are not meant to have eyes. It is forbidden. These will reveal through a sliver of light frightful images of betrayal. A world without fire. Ashen One, is this truly thy wish? Of course. I serve thee and will do as thou bidst. This will be our private affair. No one else may know of this. Stay thy path. Find lords to link the fire, and I will blindly tend to the flame until the day of thy grand betrayal. Farewell, Ashen One. Mayst thou thy peace discover.
And now for the last part of our major detour. Remember that gesture we grabbed after defeating Osiris? Well, this is the time we need it. We head back to Irithyll dungeon and take a left turn in the room with all those jailers. Outside we can find what appears to be a dragon doing that Path of the Dragon gesture. And to get to the next area we have to use that same Path of the Dragon gesture on the carpet next to him, and then wait a little bit. Well, the only reason we're even here is because we need to find 2 bosses, which of course we're going to fight. And the first one of the 2 we can fight early on in the level. Now, the Ancient Wyvern is a okay boss. It's a gimmick boss, well, a puzzle boss if you will, where you have to run around the arena, never actually fighting the Ancient Wyvern. Well, the only thing you're going to do to the boss is a plunging attack. So basically all we have to do is run, which we will do now. Well, anyway, that was just a setup for the second boss, which we need to run to again. And this is the point where we have to talk about the camera lock-on, because never, and I mean never, lock on during this fight, because it is so bad. That's just the first phase, and we're already seeing some major problems. Now, the King of Storm boss is just the first phase of another boss, which is the Nameless King, actually. But of course, doing that first phase can be really draining on your Estus charges. Also, because we're fighting this boss very early, he hits extremely hard. Because I am pretty sure this is a boss you fight after beating the game. But nonetheless, after a few hits, we can kill the dragon. And then a cutscene plays. The Nameless King is the meat and potatoes of this boss fight, but it's not really a great boss. That said, it's not horrible, but it has the same issues as Pontiff Sullivan. Delayed attacks. And oh boy, delayed attacks he has. Every single attack is delayed, comboing into each other. You have to learn the attack patterns before you can actually learn to punish him. Which is something that every Elden Ring boss has, but I digress. A good example of these delayed attacks is the lightning bolt attack, in which he hurls a lightning bolt into the air. After a certain amount of time, the lightning bolt just tries to strike you, but you can't react to the attack because, you can't see it. Again, delayed attacks issues aside, and the camera lock on in the first phase, it's still a okay boss. It's a low A tier, mainly being held down by the delayed attacks of course, but still being raised high enough to get into low A tier due to the difficulty of the boss fight. After our major detour, we can now continue with the main story. Lothric Castle is the last level in the base game, well, technically the second last area, but the Grand Archive is also part of Lothric Castle. And we also have the Kiln of the First Flame, but that's actually just a giant boss arena, so whatever. Well, in my opinion, Lothric Castle is also the best level in the game. Being linear enough to basically never get lost, but also having enough optional paths you can take to get extra items and weapons. Though it is filled to the brim with enemies, which can be annoying, especially near the beginning of the second to last boss fight. But then again, we can also call upon the ancient art of running past every enemy. Well anyway, when we're at the barracks, we can see the gate before us is blocked and being guided by a wyvern. Well, two actually, since when we come closer, a second wyvern comes and tries to kill us. So the only way we can progress now is to jump off the bridge on the first ledge and take a left turn. And after quite a bit of walking, we should be in the same building as one of those wyverns. And after climbing the ladder, we can see the wyvern, though only his foot is exposed. As we attack the wyvern, a pus of man erupts from the foot. You are not actually required to kill it, because when it erupts from the foot, it also kills the wyvern in the process. But when you do kill it, it gives 2 embers. To easily dispatch of it, you can just throw firebombs at it and attack or get a few hits in while it's stunned, and then repeat the process until it's dead. And with that taken care of, we can now open the gate to unlock the shortcut and travel to the fog gate and fight the next boss. As is with every Dark Souls game, we for some reason have to fight Ornstein in one way or another. This time it's the Dragon Slayer armor. I have no idea why they have us fight Ornstein for a third time, but I'm not complaining. The boss aside, the arena is also quite hazardous to some degree. Some of Dragon Slayer armor's attacks can launch you quite reasonably far and off the arena. Also, there are these two pilgrim butterflies, as they are called. As the name suggests, this is probably something that the pilgrims like Yol can become in some way or another. They aren't that much of an issue during the fight, but that doesn't mean they can get a sneaky hit in every once in a while, especially on consecutive playthroughs. They only have 3 attacks, a barrage of small projectiles, a big projectile and a laser attack. Again, not hard to dodge, but it doesn't mean that they can hit you, if you're not paying attention, that is. As for the Dragon Slayer armor itself, most attacks are fairly straightforward, but there's something I have to talk about, but more on that later when we talk about the New Game Plus 7 experience. One last thing I have to mention is that most of the Dragon Slayer attacks can add a shield bash or some form of shield attack at the end of its normal 2-hit combo. So whenever you're dodging, be careful for the shield, because the shield is actually way more dangerous than his giant sword, believe it or not. The last thing I have to talk about is the soundtrack for this boss, which is probably one of my favorites. Something I haven't talked about nearly enough, or actually not at all, because this is the first time. But most of the time the boss soundtrack is actually quite good in this game, unlike a certain Elden Ring. Anyways, yeah, most boss soundtracks are really good, so that's why I didn't talk about them. All in all, I think that the Dragon Slayer armor comfortably goes into A tier. And now we can continue to the next area of the game. The Grand Archives is the final area of the base game, but honestly I don't really think it's a good area, because of the same reason I didn't like Carthus. It's a maze, you know. This time it's even worse because there are no clear signs that vaguely tell you where to go, in my opinion, so it's so easy to get lost. You can say this is a skill issue, and yeah, it actually is a skill issue, but my point still stands, and I think it's a valid criticism, in my opinion. Probably. I think. Most likely. Yeah. Anyways, the first thing we can see when we open the door and take a few steps forward is that there's another Crystal Sage. The second of the 2 Crystal Sages, actually. And killing this sage will give you its scroll, which will unlock probably... Well, actually, yeah, they are the best sorceries in the game. But like the first sage, doing as much as approaching it will instantly cause it to teleport away to another section of the area. Which will happen quite a few times. But actually, the way that the sage teleports is always to a section of the area where you have to go to progress. So actually, it's not that bad, but still it's kinda bad, you know, because it's still teleporting, even though you want to kill it. And the level is still kind of a maze, because you don't really know where to go to find the sage again. Well, anyway. Another thing you can do in this level is dunk your head in wax. It actually serves a purpose because it prevents a certain enemy in this level from causing any curse buildup on you. A status effect that will quite literally one-shot you once the gauge is filled. Spoiler alert, these enemies are those ghost hands that come out of the bookshelves. But still, the curse buildup they cause is so minor it doesn't really matter whether or not you have dunked your head in wax. It's still cool, the feature is there, but it's really not that useful. And after a bit of exploring and going back and forth with the Crystal Sage, we kill it and get the Crystal Scroll. Now we can continue, but there are 3 NPCs blocking us from reaching the elevator that leads back to the bonfire. Of course, we run past them and rest at the bonfire to make them respawn and causing them to lose aggro on us. And right after that we have... the stairs. Trying to climb these stairs whilst killing every enemy is so tedious, so unnecessary, so unfun. We do not kill them, and we run past them like we did so many times. And also, there's an elevator right next to the door to enter the boss fight, so make sure to unlock that shortcut first. But without further ado, we can now open the door and fight the last Lord of Cinder.
Oh dear. Another dogged contender. Welcome, unkindled one, purloiner of cinders. Mind you, the mantle of Lord interests me none. The fire-linking curse, the legacy of lords, let it all fade into nothing. You've done quite enough. Now have your rest.
The twin princes are, as I said, the lost Lord of Cinder we have to beat to link the flame. This boss might seem difficult because the teleporting and all that, though it's actually very straightforward. Preferably the Irithyll rapier because it's my favorite weapon. Yes, I am biased. But bringing a light weapon actually makes the boss way easier because it allows you to punish the boss way more often than a heavy weapon would, like the one I am using right now. Also, using a light weapon is required if you want to cheese this boss fight, which you can easily do by rolling left or right from the boss every time it attacks and punishing with your light weapon. It causes the boss to never teleport, so it will always do the same 2 attacks on you, which you then easily punish by just using your light weapon and then rolling left or right, causing it to turn and then attack you, and as I said, never teleporting.
Dear brother, I'm on my way. My brother, unyielding sword of Lothric's prince. Rise if you would, for that is our curse.
The second phase is honestly not much more difficult than the first phase. It's just Lorien but with added magic attacks from Lothric. Though what is important to know is that from now on, whenever you defeat Lorien, Lothric will revive him at about 50% health. So now your priority is fighting Lothric. Oh god. What the fuck? So now your priority is fighting Lothric instead. Well, not really, because every time you defeat Lorien, Lothric goes to revive him, and it allows you to get some pretty big damage in on Lothric. But if you have enough finesse, you can hit both at the same time with one attack, which is especially easier in my opinion on heavy weapons, though you can still do them on light weapons, like I said, the Irithyll rapier for example. One problem I do have with this boss is the teleport plunging attack, which is goddamn way too hard to dodge. Though yes, you can say that's a skill issue, and again it is a skill issue. Nonetheless, the twin princes easily go into high A tier. And with the lost cinders of a lord, we can go back to Firelink Shrine and try to link the fire.
I can't die here. My dear goddess.
The 5 lords sit their 5 thrones, all thanks to thee, most worthy of lords. Ashen One, with the lords as thy witness, bend thy knee afore the bonfire's coiled sword, and let the lords' embers acknowledge thee as their true heir, a true lord, fit to link the fire. Ashen One, forgive me if this soundeth strange. The eyes show a world without fire, a vast stretch of darkness. But 'tis different to what is seen when stripped of vision. In the far distance, I sense the presence of tiny flames, like precious embers, left to us by past lords, linkers of the fire. Could this be what draws me to this strangely enticing darkness? Farewell, Ashen One. Mayst thou thy peace discover. Noble lords of Cinder, the fire fades. And the lords go without thrones. Surrender your fires to the true heir. Let him grant death To the old gods of Lordran, deliverers of the first flame.
There's not much to the Kiln of the First Flame, it's just a way to get to the boss. From here you can start the Ranked City DLC too, but that's for later. Also, because of the whole fire fading thing, it caused the world to literally converge into itself, explaining the weird geometry we see in the area. But without further ado, it's time to defeat the final boss of the base game. The Soul of Cinder is basically an assimilation of every person that linked the fire before you. So that means, technically, if you played Dark Souls 1, you are fighting yourself. Well, your character from Dark Souls 1, that is. The Soul of Cinder also has the biggest moveset in the game. It can switch between 4 weapons, each of which having their own moveset. Those being a staff, curved sword, straight sword and a spear. From most difficult to dodge to least difficult to dodge, I think it would be curved sword, spear, straight sword and then the staff. Because of this, I think that Soul of Cinder is the second hardest boss in the game, in my opinion. Having the final boss not be a total cakewalk is also pretty nice. Though there is no cutscene for the second phase, it does always start with the same move. Those are the exact same notes from the Gwyn OST from Dark Souls 1. Furthermore, Soul of Cinder now has the moveset of Gwyn too. By the way, if you're a magic user, if he uses the whole like 10-piece combo, you can actually spam sorceries at him. Well, most sorceries will get deflected at the final attack, but if you're using something like the Great Deep Soul or the Great Soul Drags, it will actually counter it by just moving at him again. Nonetheless, not putting this boss in S tier is an actual crime. And after quite a few minutes, we managed to chip away at the HP bar until we win and finally beat the Soul of Cinder. Now, there are 4 endings in this game. The first ending is what you get if you just complete the game and do nothing extra. You link the flame as you have been told and become the next Lord of Cinder. But if you compare this to the ending from Dark Souls 1, you can see that there's not much power left in that first flame. Because after all, the major theme in this game was the Age of Dark after all. The second ending happens if you give the Eyes of a Firekeeper to the Firekeeper and summon her after defeating the Soul of Cinder. On the other hand, to get the next ending, you can attack the Firekeeper to claim the first flame for yourself. Though this is a rather secret ending, because you probably didn't know you can still control your character when you initiate that ending. And the final ending is the one we got after doing Henri's and Uriel's questline. Like the third ending, in this one you also take the first flame for yourself. But this time you're also the Lord of Hollows, because why not? Now, you know, way back when we met Yol and quote-unquote drew out our true power, every time we did this, we received a dark sigil. With these sigils on us, we receive hollowing every time we die equal to the amount of dark sigils. And hollowing is basically what happens when an undead dies too many times. But it is the people of Londor who believe that this is their true form, so to say. And the dark sigils we received at the end of Henri's questline got us enough to become the Lord of Hollows. And as the Lord of Hollows, we now use the first flame to, quote-unquote, make Londor whole. Whatever that means. Though I am not a lore connoisseur, so I don't know what the fuck that ending is supposed to mean. And after all of that, we still have the DLC left. Dark Souls 3 has 2 DLCs, that being the Ashes of Ariandel DLC and the Ringed City DLC. Weirdly enough, they are separate DLC, even though they follow up after each other. Both being $14.99 as well. Ashes of Ariandel is the way shorter DLC, so if you have to buy one or the other, go with the Ringed City. I assume the reason they are separate DLC was to push the Season Pass as it came with both DLC. But first, to really understand what the Ringed City is about, we have to play through the Ashes of Ariandel DLC first. Ashes of Ariandel is the first of 2 DLCs this game has, set in the painted world of, you guessed it, Ariandel. We can access this DLC via talking to a NPC in the Cleansing Chapel, all the way back in the Cathedral of the Deep.
Wait, you've the same scent as that woman. Then you must be an Ashen One. You must be. Oh. You don't know how long I've searched. Oh. Please, stop. I beg of you, please, stop. Wait. Oh. Oh, don't mind me, didn't mean to fall apart. Now, Ashen One, I have a kindness to ask of you. My lady lives in the cold land of Ariandel. I need you to show her flame. A proper flame that will burn the rot away. If you truly are ash, then it must be fire that you seek. Ah, thank you. They of ash never fail. Just a moment, then. The painting of Ariandel. Well, rotted scrap of it, that is. Go on. Take it. Touch it. And then the ashes were too.
To say this DLC is short is quite a understatement. Like, you can get to the final boss and beat the DLC in about 10 minutes if you're good enough. Speaking of which, there are only two bosses in this entire DLC. So this is probably going to be a rather short section.
Have you just arrived? How very unusual. Just how long has it been? Rejoice, my new friend. For this is a true haven of the forlorn, the cold and gentle painted world of Ariandel. Quick, go along. Find one for yourself. A sweetly rotting bed to lie upon.
Pretty early on in the DLC, we already have a omen for a future boss. The big wolf we see after fighting a pack of smaller wolves. And of course, it attacks us. But we're way too good at this game, so we easily dispatch of it. Furthermore, this is not the last time we're going to see this little fella. Well, anyway, we continue and find a chapel.
Well, you look to be unkindled. No bell tolls. And yet you've slipped into the painting. Oh, no matter. If you've lost your way, the words of Lady Frida will guide you. Now go on inside, show respect, and listen carefully.
Welcome to the painted world of Ariandel. I am Frida. I have long stood beside our blessed father and the rest of the forlorn. But forlorn thou seemeth not, Ashen One. I know not the missteps which led thee to this painted world. But thy duty is all, and thy duty lieth elsewhere. Return from whence thou camest. I presume it visible to thee, the bonfire here in this room. A meek and faded thing, but 'twill guide thee nonetheless. Ah, yes, there is a thing thou shouldst by rights possess. Ours is a chance encounter, to be sure. But perhaps it was meant to be. Let this be a remembrance of this cold world, a thing to help thee bear thy duty. Now, return from whence thou camest. Thou'st a place in that world, and that alone is cause to rejoice.
Spoiler alert, we're going to fight her. But we're currently only here for the bonfire. To unlock the boss fight we have to remove the statue. But to do that we need to take a big detour.
Oh, well, there is nothing forlorn about you. You must be the other Ash, I suppose. Oh, finally, you have come. Oh, wondrous Ash, grant us our wish. Make the tales true, and burn this world away. My lady must see flame, and you have only to show her. You are Ash, are you not? Is it not fire that you seek? Surely you have seen the rot that afflicts our world. But that witch fooled the good father and buried the flame after we had all made up our minds too. So, please, grant us one wish. Make the tales true and burn this world away. My lady must see flame, and you have only to show her.
I've seen your kind, time and time again. Every fleeing man must be caught. Every secret must be unearthed. Such is the conceit of the self-proclaimed seeker of truth. But in the end, you lack the stomach for the agony that you'll bring upon yourself.
I believe I feel the scent of ash upon thee. Thou art the one of whom Uncle Gael spoke, the one to show me flame. 'Tis good. When this is done, may I return. The door is open thanks to thee.
So after God knows how many minutes of running around the map, we arrive at this fly-infested building. If you're fast enough, you don't have to fight any of these enemies. But alas, we were not quick enough, and after the cutscene, we die.
As ashes will be, ever seeking fire.
And in the nick of time, we can now fight the final boss of this DLC already.
Flame flickering once again. Not enough blood yet shed. My flail. Bring me my flail. Ah, Frida. What stops thine ears? Please, my flail. Right away. Bring Frida to me, please. Canst thou not see the flame flickering once again? Soon will it surge. I can see it, feel it.
Fret not, Father. We have no need of thy flail. 'Tis only the flame quivering at misguided ash. Please avert thine eyes. I will snuff out these ashes for good.
Sister Frida is in my opinion the second best boss in the game. There's this gimmick during the first phase where Frida will turn invisible to get an attack in, but you can actually know where she went if you look at the snow trail left behind. If you find her, you can easily get an heavy attack in. It's a really neat way to counter the attack, instead of just dodging it. Now, there's not much to the first phase other than that. Most attacks are fairly straightforward and not too difficult to dodge. You can also stagger this boss to death, but like most other bosses, some attacks have this thing called hyper armor, which prevents them from becoming staggered. So it's recommended to not be so overzealous when it comes to staggering the boss for multiple hits. We go back and forth a bit until we drain the health bar just enough for this mid-phase cutscene to play. The second phase is where this boss really shines. Sister Frida and Father Ariandel is like the Ornstein and Smo of Dark Souls 3. It's a really fun fight between a more aggressive Ariandel and a less aggressive Sister Frida. The only new attack Sister Frida gets is a modified invisibility attack, where instead of attacking you, she casts a spell to heal Father Ariandel instead. It's easily punishable, though you do have to pay a slight amount of attention for the attack since it's quite hard to see when she goes invisible whilst fighting Ariandel. If Friede is this game's version of Ornstein, then Ariandel is Smo. He hits very hard, but slow. All of his attacks have big hitboxes and even a bigger damage values. As many people already said, it's way better to fight Ariandel instead of Friede, because it's way easier to punish his attacks. Anyways, this boss easily goes into S tier, and with that out of the way, it's time we defeat Friede and Ariandel. Having the game gives you a reward before starting the third phase is a really cool way to get you off edge. The third phase is just like the first one, except Friede has gained a multitude of new black flame attacks and becomes way more aggressive, to the point it almost looks like the least aggressive Elden Ring boss. It's also that endurance part that I really like, having probably used a lot of Estus charges to get to the third phase and having to get through yet another health bar with such little resources left makes for a very difficult but still fair encounter. The better you get at the first few phases, the easier the third one becomes too, because you'll have way more Estus charges left. Though the third phase also makes for the only criticism I have for this boss. Because phase 1 is so similar to phase 3, it makes the first phase feel like a bit of filler, and this only gets exacerbated on the consecutive New Game Plus cycles. But I think that's enough talking for now, it's time we finish this. When we return to the chapel, we remember what we did to get to the Smouldering Lake and destroy the bridge, and well, looky here, we can once again descend it like a ladder. Now enter the part of the DLC where this game for some reason turns into a platformer. As far as I know, this is the only time in the game where we have to actually be precise with our character's movement, which is very odd. But we're here for the second boss of the DLC, not platforming. It's not that far away anymore when we reach the bonfire at the bottom, we just gotta take a right turn and we can find the boss there. The Champion's Gravetender is in my opinion the most mediocre boss in the game, but it's still not a bad boss. It's basically an NPC fight for the most part until we reach the 50% health mark when the Gravetender summons his wolf. The same one we fought way back when. This is what saved the boss, in my opinion. It's still pretty mediocre, but nonetheless enjoyable. The wolf also gains a new attack and becomes more aggressive when it reaches about half health too. But as long as you don't panic roll on this boss, it is really easy to fight. And if it wasn't already clear enough, this boss will be comfortably in B tier. Nothing special, but nothing bad. Because in my opinion, Dark Souls 3 doesn't really have any bad bosses. And with that out of the way, we can go back to Friede's Chapel and start the final DLC and the final stretch of the video. The Drag Heap is, in a sense, an extension to the Kiln of the First Flame, as it looks very similar to each other. Already fairly early on, we can meet an NPC who will tell us the following.
Oh, your head's square on your shoulders, is it? I thought that clamouring tin can was the last, but here we go again. What is it you want from this old stone-amped hag? I've nothing for you, not a smithereen. I just like to stand here and take in the view. Well, that came out of nowhere. You think an old stone-amped hag would be brimming with goodies? I've none of that, not a smithereen. At the close of the Age of Fire, all lands meet at the end of the earth. Great kingdoms and anemic townships will be one and the same. The great tide of human enterprise, all for naught. That's why I'm so taken by this grand sight. This must be what it's like to be a god. Oh, if you just can't stop yourself, at least hear this. Far below, there's a deep, dark hole carved out of a tree. From time to time, voices brim from the depths of the cavity even now. Mutterings of the very demon that Prince Lorien spoke of, I'm sure. Horrible sounds of an afflicted thing, yet cursing men.
We can also see phantoms of the same person we met in the Cathedral that brought us to Ariandel, guiding us. And later on, we also come across the worst enemy of the DLC, which are the Angels. These enemies are semi-invincible and will fire projectiles at you at a very long range. And of course, they also appear in reasonably open areas with barely any cover. You can't kill the angel at range directly, as you are supposed to find the host, which should look like this. Killing the host will also kill the angel, making sure it won't respawn next time you rest at a bonfire. We continue with the level until we are at a seemingly dead end. Until we reach the message and quote-unquote take the plunge, because we won't die. The demon from above and from below is the first boss fight of the Ringed City DLC. The first thing you probably notice is that one of the demons looks like it's glowing, like all the other demons we've seen before, and the other one isn't. This is actually a mechanic of the boss fight. Both demons switch between these modes after a certain amount of time. The more aggressive glowing mode, quote unquote, and the less aggressive, more passive, not glowing mode. Unfortunately, this also brings the first issue with the boss. These mode changes can bleed over, so you have to fight two of the more aggressive demons at some point at the same time, and vice versa. Another interesting quirk is that depending on which demon you kill first, you will get a slightly different phase 2. I always recommend killing the demon in pain first, because it will be easier on phase 2. this boss is fine, but I think that it has way too much HP in total. It is a really nice boss fight, but due to the excessive HP pool and the different modes in phase 1 bleeding over, it prevents this boss from going into S tier, so it'll sit at A tier instead. And one more thing, most attacks in phase 2 do have the ability to one-shot you, those being the plunging attack and the laser attack. So without further ado, I think it's time we kill the boss. And now we can enter the next area in the same way we entered the Undead Settlement. The instant we arrive at the Ringed City, we are met with one of the most annoying enemies in the DLC, the Judicators. These enemies will spawn Ruinite Phantoms, among other phantoms, to try to kill you. Luckily, in this section only, we can take a small shortcut to avoid most of these phantoms. And right after that, we can also find an NPC.
Many of us are by the fire, forsaken. I speak of thine kind and mine. Behold this city. We are kindred, but like two eyes which gaze upon the other. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin. One was a wayfaring knight on an endless, forbidden search. Only the abyss granted closure, if not reunion with his beloved. Fear not the dark, my friend, and let the feast begin.
There are actually 3 of these Locust Preacher NPCs, each of them talking about certain characters throughout the series. They're not that important, so we'll skip the rest of the Preachers for now. And the next NPC we can talk to is Shira. But be careful, because if you instantly talk to her the second you leave the area, you will get attacked by enemies. So it's best to wait a bit before you go talk to her, of course.
Speak thee the name of God, thine own God, if thou canst recall. Ah, then thou'st not forgotten. Perhaps 'tis why we may converse. I am known as Shira, servant to the Princess Filianor, matriarch of the Church. They who are ken to God's name are surely ken to the terrors of the dark. Please, I bid thee take not from the princess her peace or rest. As the fire waneth, does she lie by the dark, all for the sake of man. Thou'st a kind heart to speak to a captive such as I. It is no surprise thou rememberest our God. May I ask thee a kindness? Perhaps thou'st beheld the lone dragon that inhabited this city. Medir is his name, and the archdragons are his forebears. He once railed against the dark, but was by dark afflicted. Now here, returned, he remaineth, to watch over the sleeping princess, true to the old accord. And yet, I would have thee put the dragon to rest, before the dark consumeth him, and his vows are forgot. I offer my sincerest gratitude, thou who art ken to God's name. Please, take this. I have asked a thing most terrible of thee. May this token of thanks be of aid.
After, we can traverse through the swamp and get to the next bonfire. And right about when we leave the swamp, we can see that there's a dragon trying to fry us with his breath attacks. This is in fact the dragon that Shira talked about. So we'll have to hide in small cracks in the wall to avoid taking damage. But unfortunately, before we reach the next bonfire, we have one small puzzle section to get through. To get through this area, you basically have to take the opposite path and drop down when you see a piece of red cloth. Then following from there, enter each room to check if they aren't dead ends. If it isn't a dead end, follow the path until you reach the bonfire. And alas, one more time, after leaving, we have to fight the dragon once again, this time in an encounter on a bridge. Do notice that when we kill him, we didn't receive any souls. That's because he's still alive. Furthermore, he's an optional boss we can fight, which we can find in a hidden area after unlocking a shortcut. Remember that I said Sister Frida and Father Ariandel were the second best boss in the game? That's because Dark Eater Midir is the best boss in the game, in my opinion. Actually, it's the last good dragon fight FromSoft will ever make. Now of course, like every boss in the game, Midir has some issues. Those mainly being the camera lock on, as always, which is somehow even worse than the King of Storm boss fight. And Midir has a tendency to run around the arena every 5 seconds, so sometimes it's very difficult to get a hit in. Those issues aside, Midir is a very good boss still. A lot of breath attacks mixed with swipe, lunges and charge attacks, all of them are very punishing if you don't dodge them properly. Also, the build up to this fight is also something unique, as it's not really done before with any other boss. In fact, I like this boss so much that I did an entire hitless run of him. Midir also has one of the largest health pools in the game, having more than 22.5 thousand health on New Game Plus 7. And also, his OST is absolutely impeccable. Like Aldrich, you can only do full damage on him should you attack his head, because if you don't, you'll do about 1/3 of your damage. As for his lore, it should be pretty self-explanatory. Furthermore, actually, the NPC we talked to named Shira explained it already, so we don't have to. As always, when we reach about 50% health, Midir's second phase starts, gaining quite a few extra attacks. The only attack you really have to watch out for is the big laser attack. An attack that, like the Dancer's grab attack, will probably one-shot you if you're not built for HP. Though you do have a big punish window once the attack is over. Speaking of which, if you semi-consistently punish his attacks, you can get a stagger in and a big critical as well, including a small but noticeable punish window right after. If this boss is too hard, I suggest using the Pestilent Mist spell, as it will probably deal damage for the full duration, since Midir hitbox is big as hell. And with that out of the way, it's time we're done with this fight. And of course, Midir gets into S tier. I consider the last part of the DLC to be a bit of a boss rush. Especially if you fight Midir before the last boss. Because right after Midir is the next boss already.
Unknowing visitor, return from whence thou camest. The abyss runneth deep, by the king's decree. None may disturb our mistress's slumber. Turn back, unknowing visitor, by the king's decree.
I can't really say much about the Spear of the Church boss since it's actually a special boss. Because instead of a normal boss, the Spear of the Church boss summons an invader to kill you. What you can do, however, is open the game in offline mode and then you will have to fight an NPC boss instead. So we'll talk about that. For an NPC boss fight, Half-Light is actually pretty decent, but nothing too special. So this boss is also tied to a covenant, that being the Spears of the Church, obviously. And this boss is the main way to get medals for that covenant. In addition, you can find a semi-secret area in the game that allows you to respawn Judicator Argo and allows you to redo the boss fight. Half-Light is also accompanied by one Painting Guardian, and another one once he reaches about half health. The only thing to worry about with these Painting Guardians is that they can heal Half-Light. As for Half-Light himself, his attacks are fairly standard considering it's an NPC, though his Dark Blade attacks can be pretty hard to punish because they come out way too quickly. It's overall an okay boss fight, but really not any worse than every other boss we've talked about, so we'll barely put him into A tier. And with Half-Light defeated, we can fight the last boss in the game.
Eleanor, help me, please. The Red Hood is come to eat us, to eat our dark souls.
What? Still here? Hand it over, that thing, your dark soul. For my lady's painting.
After touching the egg, we are transported to what seems to be the end of time, with no one before us except Slave Knight Gael. Something that has been mentioned in the previous DLC is the new painting of a world to replace Ariandel. But to do this, the painter had to use the Dark Soul. That's the name of the game, that's so quirky, guys. Anyways. This Dark Soul was claimed by the Pygmies, but something their blood dried up, so the Dark Soul lost its power, yada yada. Enter Gael, who started cannibalizing the Pygmies to prevent their blood from drying up. Yeah, I have no idea. If Soul of Cinder is the hardest boss in the main game, Slave Knight Gael is the hardest boss in the DLC. The first phase may seem fairly straightforward, but it's when we reach the second phase where things get very difficult. But before that, we have to talk about the first phase a bit. Like most bosses at this point, Gael's attacks will do a major amount of damage if not dodged properly. His combo attack will also straight up kill you if you panic roll dodge during one of the opening attacks. And his lunge attack with his sword will also instantly kill you if you don't dodge it. And furthermore, actually, this boss will probably always two-shot you, especially when we reach the second phase, which we eventually do when we get enough damage in to start the second phase.
Is this the blood? The blood of the dark soul.
The main gimmick of the second phase is that from now on every attack will have a second hitbox thrown at you in the form of escape. This causes the dodge window to be way more precise than phase 1. Like Sister Frieda and Father Ariandel, the mid-phase cutscene goes hard, feel free to screenshot kind of hard. And with the second phase comes an entirely different arsenal of attacks, going from swipes, stabs, to actual strikes with his sword. He also gets a bit more aggressive in the second phase, so it'll be harder to get a heal in too. Alas, Slave Knight Gael was secretly a 3-phase boss too. As we nearly deplete his health bar, a 3rd phase starts. Now, with a few extra attacks added onto his standard attacks, the amount of stuff that's thrown at you becomes absolutely ridiculous. Like, he will spawn in soul projectiles that upon landing will cause lightning bolts to strike the ground, as well as shooting arrows at you with a fully automatic crossbow, by the way. The 3rd phase has to be the hardest phase in the entire game, but nothing we can't overcome as we near the end of the fight. And if it wasn't already clear enough, this boss easily gets into S tier.
With this will I paint a world. Please tell me thy name. I would name this painting after thee. I see. We are much alike. Then I will name this painting Ash. 'Twill be a cold, dark, and very gentle place. And one day it will make someone a goodly home. I wonder when Uncle Gael intends his return. I hope the new painting will be to him a gentle home.
And if it wasn't already clear enough, this boss easily gets into S tier. And now, with every boss defeated, I think it's time to show the full tier list of every boss. And now it's time to start the last part of the video, the New Game Plus 7 experience. I'm gonna have the Madeira hitlist run in the background where I'll talk about the New Game Plus cycles for a bit. Hopefully the segment won't be longer than like 5 minutes. The main issue that I have with the New Game Plus cycles is that the ratio of the game getting harder and you getting stronger becomes way more favored towards the game getting harder. Let me explain a bit. For your character, even though your stats can go all the way up to 99, it stops giving actual benefits at 46. So that means that, for example, the amount of HP you get with 1 point into Vigor goes from something like 50 to 5. This is known as the soft cap. But for most builds you already reach this soft cap with your most important stats at about New Game Plus 5. So when you reach New Game Plus 7, the only option you have is to expand your arsenal of weapons and magic, so you can always use the weakness of a boss to your advantage. But of course that doesn't mean anything when in the end it only does about 10 extra damage overall and the boss gets 50,000 more health. Furthermore, the amount of souls you need to level up becomes exponentially higher. So at a certain point, it becomes impossible to grind levels without using Yol's draw out your true strength action and speedrunning the game over and over again to get those 5 levels every playthrough. Furthermore, the lack of HP at higher levels causes bosses to gain more one-shot attacks, which becomes very infuriating really quickly as it becomes almost too punishing to miss an attack without using an Ember. For example, at New Game Plus 7, these attacks were able to one-shot me at 46 Vigor and with a full Lothric Knight armor set, without an Ember active of course. Every heavy attack from Dragon Slayer armor, Madeira's laser attacks, the Demon Princess laser attacks, the Demon Princess plunge attack, Frida's grab attack, almost all of Yorm's heavy attacks in its second phase, the Soul of Cinder's grab attack during his second phase, almost all of Crystal Sage's magic attacks, Lorien's plunging attack, and Lorien's flaming sword heavy attack. And those are just the attacks I can name on the top of my head. Furthermore, damage on light weapons becomes very weak in my opinion. So if you use light weapons you have to resort to stats effects such as blood loss and frostbite to deal any damage, because the damage they deal is based off of a percentage of the enemy's health. And one last thing is that environmental hazards also become negligible as they get old fast. An enemy getting the jump on you and pushing you off a ledge only happens once really, because the second time you know the enemy is there and will try to push you off the ledge. Just like how a mimic will only catch you once. But those are the only real issues I have with New Game Plus cycles. But I guess that's it. That's the end of the script. So that's the end of the video.